you are practicing whatever practice you have on that day, because it might change from day to day, right? We
Yeah.
don't necessarily practice the same thing every day, but it's just having the notion of a practice. How do you reflect within the practice and after the practice, but also before you start?
I think for myself, I really am at a point where I really just intuit into a particular practice, or sometimes it's just based on whatever is most practical at that point of time as well. So, like for example, now that we are in this whole MRO situation, so I can't go outdoors, well, meaning I can't go outside, right? So usually I like to go to the basketball court to do my
Yeah.
practice there. So just make do, utilizing the space that I have here in my condo, and just see what's available and what's practical to do it. There's no way I can hang my ring, so I stopped doing my ring work. There's good floor space, so I do a little bit more locomotion based stuff. Or I've recently gotten into kettlebell. So I don't have much equipment at home,
Mm,
so, and usually I try to lift at least once or twice a week. Um, but without the access to the gym or even weights at home, I resorted to buying a kettlebell, a 20 kilogram kettlebell.
wow, well done.
Yeah, came pretty fast. And I mean, I've always dabbled in using the kettlebell just for, as a form of an alternative to a dumbbell. But I've also researched into how like proper functional training it
Mm,
is.
yeah.
Have you seen that really old school kettlebell video on YouTube? The guy, is his name Pavel? I think it's Pavel.
Okay, yeah. Pavel's one of
Right?
the the original creators of some
Yeah,
form of programming.
and he's like straight up Russian, right? So he goes like, "Comrades, let me show you how to become a man. This is how you do it." I thought it was
Sounds like a
hilarious.
Russian Jocko.
It's hilarious. I first heard him on Joe Rogan, and then I saw his video on YouTube. Anyway, so I mean, there are a bunch of YouTube videos that I've explored doing kettlebell work. So that's something that I've um, exploring in terms of the physical practice, because it's sort of one of those blips of that I missed. Kind of, like there's so much. I mean, you obviously know there's so much to sort of learn in terms of the variety of tools that you can sort of adopt and formulate, like a strength training practice or a functional training practice. So kettlebell is just one of those that I've never really explored much. So now
Yeah,
I have one 20 kilogram
yeah,
kettlebell, and I've been
yeah. And you
just,
you had to do everything with it.
yeah. So it's proving to be quite good. And here's the thing, right? Sometimes when you have the freedom of choice, it sort of debilitates you, it paralyzes you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That paradox, right? You have infinite number of choices, then
Hmm.
you can choose, versus like if you have now this one thing,
Oh,
what is,
yes,
right?
for sure.
It's also something that a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, is that the the ones who really always come through with breakthroughs are the ones who've always put themselves in a corner and then try to find a way out of it.
Mm.
So it's interesting that if you can sort of do that in your own movement practice, is to put yourself in a situation where it's really difficult to get out of, or it's a situation where you have never exposed yourself to before. Then the gear starts to move, and everything starts to push in a direction where you are in a space of uh, that you're in an unfamiliar space. It's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and you got to figure your way out of this, so to speak. And I think it's one of those things where, again, it can be the movement practice can inform your life decisions in terms of like business, in terms of how you handle conflict or how you handle problems and challenges. It's to me that those are the important things to really translate from your practice to your everyday living. So that's
How
just
about,
one.
yeah, that's just one example. How about like during? How do you first practice observing what comes up in the middle of the practice?
It's quite hard to because if you are really sort of lost in the moment of doing, okay, or at least completely absorbed in what you're doing, then you don't necessarily have optics in such a way that you can observe everything that's going on. But I think you can sort of identify like things like your overall emotion, your overall mindset,
Mm,
where it's at, and the fluctuations. It's hard to have sort of I mean, you probably don't even have a tool to actually measure like how much it drops or how much it picks up. So the only way really is to, once you are out of it, then you can sort of reflect on it, and it's like, oh, what just happened or what just transpired, and then from there make adjustments so that when you repeat it, then you try to not repeat it the same way. Or if it went well, which in my case, I like this to look at, okay, what went well, right? Because sometimes you can dig yourself a hole and start looking for problems or start looking for things that might not be there, and it can set you down a path that can be quite detrimental in the long run, because you're only looking out for mistakes or the negative aspects of things that surfaces. But we also have to recognize, like, you also have to identify the positives, right? Like what what went right, not just
yeah,
what went wrong.
yeah.
So if you can look at what went right, then that also can translate to things like giving you more confidence and reassuring that, oh, your methodology is correct. Your whatever pre-existing mindset that you have applied into what you just did is showing good result. So this is where you sort of like, okay, can I replicate that in a way that is not necessarily the same, but giving you that that outcome of how you felt while you were doing it, um, being similar, if that makes sense.
It
Because
makes sense
sometimes
to
when,
me.
okay, right, so and that's the interesting thing about when you stop looking at reps, sets, and
Mm,
weights, and all that becomes just a variable for you to plug in order for you to facilitate the idea or that state that you're looking for, rather than having the tools being the end result measurement. Because we're looking sometimes, this is how a lot of people train, is like, okay, I'm going to do 12 reps of this much of a weight, and if I hit those numbers, it's absolute, unrefutable, I win. But is it really the case? Because if you look at a deeper layer, that maybe by doing that, you gassed out, or
mm.
you hit a plateau at the sixth rep, and then from there onwards, you were just not in your body anymore. You were just trying to block out all the pain and whatever that's coming through. So you're not necessarily processing,
Mm.
which can be beneficial if your only goal is to develop resilience, right? And if that is your only goal, is to develop resilience, then I think that sort of um, methodology works. But if you're looking to develop other aspects, then maybe that might not be the best way to approach it.
I think that is a good point, because people sometimes start something without really understanding what they're trying to achieve. So what you said about setting, let's say, sets and reps to some people, or to more to people who are more aware of what they're trying to get out of, it's still setting an intention. The intention just sounds different. For us, it might be, you know what, I want to see what movement patterns appear if I put this and put that together. But for some
Yeah.
people, it might just be like, oh, I just need to get things done. It's the notion of getting things done. That's the self achievement for the day.
Yeah.
So, how do we help those who haven't been exposed to an explorative approach to a movement practice? How do we introduce something like this to them? What's an easy way to start?
To start is really just not mind numbing yourself, especially when you're if you haven't spent much time being in your body, and a lot of your mental energy is projected outwards, as most of us do that. Then the time that you spend practicing, the first and foremost practice is how long or what duration can you commit in terms of just the focus and presence towards being in your body, right?
Mm.
And not tuning out, especially when things get boring or difficult or challenging. These moments, like these, it's like standing in front of where at the coast, and then you're seeing these waves come in, and you're standing there, and when the waves hit you, do you sort of like just kind of like cover yourself up and tell yourself that, oh, I don't want to sense anything that this wave is bringing in, or I'm just gonna receive this wave no matter how hard it is or how cold the water is gonna be, or just hold my ground and be firm and let this wave pass. I think that in some ways I'm using that metaphor or that example just to highlight, yeah, by staying in your body long
Yeah.
enough, that in essence is, I think, the basis of all practices, right? And because if only you inhabit this space, which is in your body, uh, then you can start to notice things. But if you're just in and out, like, oh, I'm here for 5 minutes
Yeah.
now, and usually the 5 minutes that you're in your body is the rest in between. And while you're doing it, you're just like, I just want to tune out and I want to. But you see
Exactly.
that a lot, right? And
Yeah.
you can see the difference between a person running on a treadmill at a gym.
Mm.
I mean, they're looking for all sorts of things to distract them from what they're there to do,
Yeah.
versus someone who's practicing, say, martial arts, and they're looking for that one perfect kick or something, and the way they bring that presence in every repetition is so vastly different, right? And I'm highlighting extremes here just so that people can tell that, okay, maybe somewhere in the middle is where I want to be, or somewhere in the middle is probably best for the average person, and for all of us to cultivate a very fruitful and beneficial movement practice. Because you can have a movement practice that is not beneficial. It could be, mainly for vanity or ego driven
Mm.
purposes, and that, to a degree, I would say is detrimental and not necessarily healthy.
In the long run, right? And in the short run, it might seem like an attractive pull to draw someone into a practice. But I think something like that eventually helps the person realize, oh, there's more to this than that. And I think as humans are, I mean, we're innately intelligent in that sense that if we sense something is beneficial for our survivorship, we will continue. But it's in the sense it's to get people to wake up, right? To get more people to wake up. And I like your ocean analogy, because that's the second analogy I heard today that was reflecting on that. And I was having a conversation with my cancer friend. He's back in the hospital after surviving surgery and chemotherapy for another scan and results, because they might be looking at something else right now. That's a possible another diagnosis, but let's hope it doesn't get there. But what we're saying is it's okay to be optimistic. It's okay to be grateful, but it's also okay to not deny the negative emotions. It's okay to accept them. Just like how if you take a wave that's coming at you, just take it and know that the wave will dissipate. But you have to have something to stand your ground on. You have to have that belief. But if you keep pushing that away, whatever it is, the pressure is going to build. And sooner or later, that will explode in some way, some form.
When you are constantly trying to sort of create this idea of there are these things that I want and there are these things that I don't want, and it's okay to have preference. I think all of us have preferences, but when it gets to a point where the preferences drives your motivations and your intentions, then I think that becomes problematic, because now I think in Buddhism terms, it's like you're creating suffering for yourself, right? When and the preferences have now risen in terms of priority in how you can get up to the point where how you view yourself, how you see yourself, and how you identify, how you relate to people. And when these preferences become the dominant factor that is driving every decision, every emotion, then you are creating a huge, whirlwind of suffering for yourself. Because truth is that there are only so little things that you can have control over in your life. I think that
Yep.
the sooner you come to an acceptance of that fact, then it will be easier for you to navigate through all the ups and downs. So you generally you want your ups and downs not to go like that, but more like that, right? Yeah. You don't want tidal waves and tsunamis in your life.
Yeah.
Gentle waves crashing in, and once there's acceptance, then the wave itself naturally just sort of decreases, because
Yeah.
you're not feeding it, right? You're not feeding it with your attachment towards preference, and that is the biggest thing I've learned in my practice, especially my physical practice. So, at one point I was really obsessed about handstands and getting my one arm chin up, and a few years ago, and I had to go through a lot of suffering, and I recognized that a lot of that suffering was created by myself and no one else.
Yeah.
I created that suffering, right? And the quicker I realized that, or it took some time, but the more I realized, the more acceptance I had over that these things are just me creating attachment over it for no really particular reason, actually. Like, what can I do really with a one arm handstand or a one arm chin up, right? It's
Well, in your
complete.
case, it might be beneficial because you are a climber. So I'm sure it does have some sort of
Well, yeah,
relative carryover.
some carry over, but I'm not like an elite climber. I'm a recreational climber, so yeah, there is some benefits to it, but to be completely attached and to create that much suffering myself, then I realized, like, well, what am I actually doing here? Like, and but I think for a lot of people that might not be the case. It's only for people like us who are so committed, and we spend so much time in this area, being in our bodies and moving so much, and it becomes a bit of an obsession, and that can also be problematic if, again, the intentions behind why we do so much isn't clear to us, then it can also lead us down to a not so good path.
Yeah, having clarity. Wow, thank you. Thank you for sharing these insights. Hearing your insights on these, is this how you see leading Homo sapiens?
Yeah, for sure. I think Homo sapiens, to me, is an idea, right? That humanity is evolving. I mean, and the next step of evolution is really a lot to do with consciousness, just the evolution of consciousness itself. We've gone through, technological and all of that, and at this point, really, for the human to transcend, we don't need that much in terms of external technological advancement. I mean, the next thing is probably assimilation with some form of technology, with AI and stuff, and that's the transference of consciousness. But what the way I understand from my study of yoga and is that the refinement of consciousness is our own responsibility. And whether if that sort of situation comes through or not with AI, we first have to get ourselves to version 2.0, and that a lot has to do with understanding the mind and how to cultivate a more steady mind. Because if you look at how transient and how the mind fluctuates on a second to second basis, you can see that the contents that are in the mind is not stable. Like when you have then suddenly some external stimuli comes in and then takes your attention away, and you're just gone. You're just going from there to there, and then think about something we need to do, later, or the day, or we forgot to do something, so it's so transient that it's not easy to have clarity. And again, if you go to have clarity, if you look at the face of a lake, what do you need to be able to see clearly what's water, right? The water needs to be completely still. You have some ripples here and there, it's almost pretty hard to see very clearly what's beneath it, right? So to get to that stillness requires a disciplined, formal practice of meditation. And a lot of experts have already said that meditation will be something that is obvious to us in this coming decade, like how running, exercising, eating healthy, all this became a thing that was just very obvious to us, right? I think 40 years ago, if you tell someone like, oh, hey, I'm going out for a run, person probably asks you like, what are you running away from? But 25, 30 years, everyone's doing it, and you're like, I'm going for a run. We instantly know that, okay, you're taking care of your health. Same thing with diet, right? That in the last 20, 30 years, that shift in paradigm also has happened. So the next shift is going to be when it comes to meditation. And I think you already see that happening in a lot of parts of the world, and slowly it's an emerging trend. And I think for the masses, it will be more known as mindfulness, and that is probably what you'll see, mindfulness being the main driver for people picking up practices like meditation, sound healing, utilizing binaural beats to calm the mind. I utilize the flotation tank in a deep deprivation flotation tank for a few years now, and I go actually once a month, and the level of rejuvenation, not just from the physiological aspect, but even just from my mental state is unparalleled because you're in a tank that is completely dark, that is completely still. The temperature of the water is exactly the same as your body. You basically have nothing to process. Like there's no feed of
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
Your nervous system just completely just shuts down or goes into hibernation in just like few seconds and or a few minutes, and what you're left with is just your damn mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
That just runs amok. And again, with the practice of meditation, that in that kind of space for a duration of say an hour to an hour and a half, you can get really, really quiet. And I have yet to have an experience in terms of how deep my meditation can go anywhere else but in the tank. So technologies like these are gonna really take over. I think that the overall holistic wellness trends and the overall health and wellness trends in the next decade or so. In a nutshell, Homo sapiens really is about being awakened and adopting practices that can not just take care of your physical and mental health, but your emotional and spiritual health as well. And that is the full spectrum, as I see, as your well-being. And it's important, especially times like these. I think it's even more important to really look at these aspects, learning how to pause and learning how to slow down, and also knowing when to pick up in terms of speed and all of that is really a skill that I think living in a modern day life, especially we're surrounded with so much technology, and technology is constantly trying to pull us in. Well, not the technology itself, but the actors behind the technology have vested interest in us being very attached to the technology. So
Yeah.
there's also a huge thing called digital minimalism that's also happening, and there are a lot of books out there that highlights on this subject, and it's also something that I'm very, very exploring very much on the surface. But yeah, I think that's the trend that we're going towards. So, and I'm just hoping that Homo sapiens becomes one of the platforms that people can leverage off and jump off on in going that in that direction, along with
Yeah,
the.
I certainly hope so. Because businesses out there can market all they want, but it comes down to the person behind the business, behind the brand, their values, their insights, their philosophy that would really resonate, and you draw your tribe to you.
I think that's what everyone's doing, especially in this modern day economy, and I think with the new world that we're about to step into once the COVID-19 thing dies down a little bit, is that yeah, we have to reevaluate a lot of things. There's so much uncertainty, and there's so much change that is happening as we speak. So.
Yep. It's going to be a new norm for all of us, and I say this often, is like everyone's going to be a little different coming out of this, and I can't wait to meet the new you.
It is very scary because change is never easy. Change
Yep.
is scary,
Yep.
but again,
But the encouraging thing is we're all changing together.
let's hope so. Because
Yeah.
the ones who don't evolve will get left behind, right? As they
Yep.
say, and that's the cruel fact of evolution, right?
Yep. Okay, well, I'll let you guys be. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Hey, no problem. Anytime. Thanks, Emily, for the opportunity and for the chat. As always, it's a lot of fun. Catch
Y'all.
up soon.
Catch up soon.